In this video, we're going to look at recursive functions. Recursive functions are just functions that call themselves. So we're going to start out by looking at a recursive function and a non-recursive function and talking about what the difference is. We're going to start by looking at a non-recursive function, sometimes called an iterative function because you iterate through something, you loop through something. So this particular function finds the sum of all the numbers from 1 up to n. N is whatever you pass into it. So let's say I pass in the number 4, and here I am down here in the main method passing in the value 4. So let's think about what this function would do. Well, it just loops from 1 up to n inclusive, so it's going to loop up to 4, and it adds the value I to the answer every time through. So hopefully you can see pretty quickly this is just going to sum up all of the numbers from 1 to whatever n is. And if I run it, if I pass in a 4, so that'd be 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1, I think that's 10. And if I run it, you will see, in fact, it tells me the answer is 10. Now let's look at the recursive version of this same function. This is the recursive version of the same function. Now, how do I know it's recursive? Well, recursive functions are functions that call themselves, and down here in the else, you can see that I'm calling myself. I don't know why I'm saying myself. I mean, I'm not the function, but the function is calling itself, right? It's called recursive sum, and it's calling itself with the value n minus 1, 1 less than n. Interesting. And I'm passing in the value 4. Let's see if this works. So this should be summing up the numbers the same as the other function, and if I run it, I'll run my recursive sum up, and it gives me 10. All right, let's trace through this to see exactly what's going on here. So in order to trace through this function, I'm going to draw myself a picture of what's going on here at the right. So far, this r of 4 represents my original method call, recursive sum of 4. That's r of 4. I'm calling it just r instead of writing recursive sum every time. I hope that's okay. So what's going on inside of this function call, this method call? Well, n is 4. So is n equal to 1? No. So it does the else case. So it's going to return n, which is 4, plus recursive sum of n minus 1. Well, n minus 1 is 3. So that's why I wrote 4 plus r of 3. So it calls itself again. It calls recursive sum again, but this time passing a 3. So it's not a loop. I really need to draw a whole separate function. So this is what's going on inside the method call r of 3. Well, n is now 3, so it's not equal to 1 yet. So I'm going to return n, which is 3, plus the recursive sum of n minus 1, which is, of course, 2. So what's going on inside r of 2? Yeah, I got to draw a brand new copy of the function. So inside r of 2, well, n is 2, so that's just 2 plus r of 1, right? 2 minus 1 is 1. All right, what's going on inside r of 1? Oh, it's getting exciting. So this is what's happening inside r of 1. Well, I just wrote a 1 because it says if n equals 1, just return 1. Well, where does this 1 get returned to? It gets returned to whoever called this function. Well, where did this get called from? Well, right here. So this 1 gets returned to this position right here. I just figured out that r of 1 equals 1. Okay, so now what happens? 1 plus 2. Okay, that's 3. So I just figured out r of 2 is 3. That 3 gets returned up to here. So now I have 3 plus 3, which is 6. I just figured out r of 3 equals 6. That 6 gets returned up to here. All right, we're almost done. 6 plus 4 is 10. We just figured out r of 4 equals 10. And we're done. Isn't that awesome? So don't worry if it's not 100% clear yet. Recursion takes a while to really understand, and you're going to get a lot of practice with this. But let's just talk about this method just a little bit more. Recursive functions typically have at least 2 cases. One case is called the base case. Now the base case is the non-recursive case, right? If n equals 1, it's just returning 1. It's not calling itself. Again, that's called the base case. And typically recursive functions have at least one, could have more than one, recursive case. This is my recursive case. It's returning n plus the recursive call. Just to summarize, Recursive functions usually have two parts, right? There's a base case, which is the non-recursive part. That's usually a simple case that can be solved without calling itself again. And then there's the recursive case, or cases, in which you call yourself with a simpler version of the original problem. In the last example, I was calling the function with n minus 1. That's a simpler version. So anything that can be done recursively can also be done iteratively, and vice versa. For every recursive function, you can write an equivalent iterative function. So why would you write something recursively when you can write it iteratively? Well, some problems are much easier to solve with recursion, and we're going to get to some of those. Oh, it's going to be so much fun. All right, well, that's your brief introduction to recursion, and thanks so much for watching.